We arrived late to Christmas dinner and overheard my daughter-in-law mocking my husband's burn scars. People lose their appetite seeing those horrible marks. Her father arrived right behind us. He turned pale. "I know those scars," he whispered. "Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button." Let me tell you how 20 minutes of overhearing a conversation destroyed my family and revealed a secret that had been buried for 55 years. Traffic on Christmas Eve is a special kind of hell, and my husband James and I were stuck right in the middle of it. A jackknifed semi had turned Interstate 95 into a parking lot, and we'd been sitting there for 40 minutes while our son David's Christmas dinner got colder by the minute. "We should call them," James said, drumming his scarred fingers on the steering wheel. Those burns covered his right hand and arm, traveling up to his neck and part of his face. 55 years since the fire that gave them to him, and they were still the first thing people noticed about my husband. I didn't mind them. I'd fallen in love with James Porter when we were both 17, 3 years after the accident that marked him. To me, those scars were proof that my husband was a hero, even if he never wanted to talk about how he got them. "David knows we're stuck in traffic," I said, checking my phone. "I texted him 20 minutes ago." James shifted in his seat, uncomfortable in the dress shirt I'd convinced him to wear. He hated formal dinners, hated being looked at, hated the way people's eyes would flicker to his scars and then quickly away, pretending they hadn't noticed. Our daughter-in-law Ashley had never been good at pretending. The traffic finally started moving at 6:30. We were supposed to have arrived at 5. David and Ashley's house in the suburbs was beautiful. All colonial architecture and manicured lawns, the kind of place that screamed success. Our son had done well for himself as a corporate lawyer, married a beautiful woman, given us 2 grandchildren. But something had been off lately. David seemed tired whenever we visited, worn down, and Ashley had been making comments, little digs that she probably thought were jokes, about James's appearance, about his reluctance to take family photos, about how he always wore long sleeves, even in summer. "Maybe we should have brought wine," James said as we pulled into their driveway. I could hear the anxiety in his voice. He knew Ashley didn't like him, though he'd never said it out loud. "We brought wine last time, and she said we were predictable," I reminded him. "We brought flowers the time before, and she said they clashed with her color scheme. There's no winning with Ashley." We walked up to the front door, and that's when I heard it. The window next to the door was cracked open, probably to let out cooking smells, and Ashley's voice carried clearly into the cold December air. "I still can't believe you expect me to seat him at the head of the table. People lose their appetite seeing those horrible marks. He looks like something out of a horror movie." I felt James freeze beside me. My hand was on the doorbell, but I couldn't press it, couldn't move. "Ashley, that's my father." David's voice, tired, defeated. "We've been through this. And I've been through 12 years of Christmas dinners trying not to stare. Your mother is bad enough with her church volunteer stories, but at least she's presentable. I invited my parents this year, David. What are they supposed to think when they see him? Maybe they'll think he's a human being who got hurt in an accident," David said, but there was no fight in his voice. "We've talked about this." "No, you talked. I sat there and took it because that's what I always do." "Well, not tonight. Tonight I'm saying what I really think. Your father gives me the creeps, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." The sound of a car pulling up behind us made us both turn. A silver Mercedes, expensive and gleaming. An older couple got out, the man tall and distinguished with silver hair, the woman elegant in a red dress. Ashley's parents. I'd never met them before. In 12 years of marriage, Ashley had always said they were too busy to attend family functions, always traveling or committed to something else. The man stopped when he saw us, his eyes going to James. And then something strange happened. All the color drained from his face. He grabbed his wife's arm so hard she gasped. "Robert? What's wrong?" she asked. But Robert Mitchell wasn't looking at her. He was staring at James's scars, at the pattern of burn tissue that traveled from his hand up his arm. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I know those scars," he whispered. "Dear God, I know those scars." The words hung in the frozen air between us. Robert Mitchell's eyes locked on my husband's face. His wife, Patricia, looked between them, confused and increasingly alarmed. "Robert, what are you talking about?" she demanded. "How could you possibly know this man?" Before anyone could answer, the front door swung open. Ashley stood there, her face flushed from cooking, a perfect hostess smile plastered across her face. That smile died the instant she saw all of us standing there in her driveway, a tableau of confusion and shock. "Mom, Dad, you're early," she said, then noticed James and me. "Oh, Helen. James, you're finally here." The emphasis on finally wasn't lost on me. Neither was the way her eyes flickered to the open window, calculating whether we might have heard anything. The guilt that flashed across her face told me everything I needed to know. "Are you going to invite us in, or should we conduct Christmas dinner in the driveway?" I asked sweetly. Years of dealing with difficult people at my hospital job had taught me how to maintain a smile while wanting to strangle someone. Ashley stepped back, flustered. Of course, come in, everyone." Robert Mitchell hadn't moved. He was still staring at James, who had gone very still beside me. I knew that stillness. It was how James reacted when he was overwhelmed, when he wanted to run, but was forcing himself to stay put. "Robert, are you coming?" Patricia asked, her voice sharp with concern. He shook himself, like a man coming out of a trance. "Yes. Sorry. I thought I recognized something." But his eyes kept returning to James as we all filed into the house. David appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron that said "Grill Master" that Ashley had probably bought him. Our son looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from more than just a long day at work. When he saw his father, his face brightened genuinely for the first time. "Dad, Mom, I'm so glad you made it." He hugged us both, and I felt him hold on to James a little longer than usual. Traffic was awful. "Right? Complete nightmare," James confirmed, his voice steady despite what we'd just heard. "Sorry we're late." Ashley was making introductions, her voice bright and fake. "David, these are my parents, Robert and Patricia Mitchell. Mom, Dad, this is David's father James and his mother Helen. We've heard so much about you," Patricia said graciously, extending her hand. She was clearly the social one in the relationship. "Ashley talks about David's family constantly." "I just bet she does," I thought, shaking her hand. "All good things, I hope." Robert finally stepped forward, still looking shaken. He extended his hand to James, and I watched my husband hesitate before taking it. The moment their hands connected, Robert's grip tightened. "Where did you get those scars?" he asked abruptly. Patricia gasped at his rudeness, and Ashley's face went pale. "Dad, that's not appropriate," she said quickly. "Let's all go sit down. Dinner's almost ready." But Robert wasn't letting go of James's hand. "Please, I need to know. Where did you get them?" James's jaw tightened. I knew he was about to pull away, to retreat into himself the way he always did when people asked about the scars. But something in Robert's face stopped him. The older man wasn't asking out of morbid curiosity. He was asking like his life depended on the answer. "A fire," James said quietly. "I was 15. It was a long time ago." "Where?" Robert pressed. "What kind of fire?" "Dad, seriously," Ashley interjected, her voice rising. "This is completely inappropriate." "Ashley, stop." Robert's voice cracked like a whip. I'd never heard him speak before, but clearly this was a man used to being obeyed. He turned back to James. "Was it an apartment building? In Philadelphia? August 1970? The room went utterly silent. Even the Christmas music playing softly in the background seemed to fade away. James's face had gone white. "How did you know that?" he whispered. Robert's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was there. You pulled me out. You saved my life." If someone had told me that Christmas dinner would end with my daughter-in-law in tears, my son looking like he'd been hit by a truck, and a 73-year-old man crying into his wine glass, I would have told them they were crazy. But there we were. After Robert's revelation, Ashley had tried to salvage the dinner. She'd ushered everyone to the dining room, served the food with shaking hands, and attempted to make normal conversation. But normal had left the building the moment Robert Mitchell recognized my husband's scars. The children, Emma and Tyler, sat at the kids' table in the kitchen, blissfully unaware of the tension. Their voices and laughter felt like they were coming from another world, a simpler one where Christmas dinner didn't involve life-altering revelations. Robert couldn't stop looking at James. Patricia had given up trying to understand what was happening and was simply watching her husband with growing concern. David kept glancing between his father and his father-in-law, clearly trying to process the impossible connection. And Ashley? Ashley looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. "I need to know the whole story," Robert said finally, pushing away his untouched plate. "I've spent 55 years wondering who pulled me out of that building. I never saw your face clearly. There was too much smoke, too much chaos. The police couldn't identify you because you left before the ambulances arrived." James's fork clattered against his plate. "I left because I was scared. I was 15 years old, and my parents had told me never to draw attention to myself. We were poor, living in the worst part of Philadelphia. My father always said that poor kids who played hero ended up blamed for whatever went wrong." "So you saved someone's life and then just ran away?" Patricia asked, not unkindly. She seemed to be grasping the magnitude of what had happened. "I went to the hospital later," James said quietly. "I wanted to make sure to check if anyone had died. The nurse told me everyone made it out. That was enough for me." "Everyone made it out because of you," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was 18, living in that building with 5 other college students. We'd been drinking, celebrating the end of summer. Someone knocked over a candle, and the whole place went up like a tinderbox. I was on the 3rd floor, trapped in my room. The hallway was nothing but flames." He paused, wiping his eyes with his napkin. Patricia reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'd given up," Robert continued. "I was lying on the floor by the window, trying to breathe through my shirt, waiting to die. And then this kid appeared out of nowhere, coming through the fire like it was nothing. You grabbed me, threw me over your shoulder, and carried me down a back staircase I didn't even know existed." James was staring at his plate, his jaw clenched. I knew he hated talking about this, hated being the center of attention. "The stairs collapsed," James said finally. "Right after we got to the bottom. That's when I got burned, when the ceiling came down. I dropped you, pushed you out the back door, and ran. I could hear sirens coming, and I just ran. I tried to find you," Robert said. "For years I tried. I hired investigators, put out ads in newspapers, even went on local television once. But I had no name, no face, just the memory of a teenage kid who saved my life and then vanished." Ashley stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need to check on the pie," she said, her voice too high, too tight. But David was looking at her with an expression I'd never seen before, something between realization and betrayal. "You knew," he said softly. "Somehow you knew about this." Ashley froze halfway to the kitchen. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," David continued, standing up himself. "Your father just told us he's been looking for the person who saved him for 55 years. And somehow, after 12 years of marriage, after 12 years of you making comments about Dad's scars, of you finding excuses to keep your parents away from family events, suddenly they show up on Christmas Eve." "That's ridiculous," Ashley said, but she wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. "It's just a coincidence." "Is it?" I asked quietly. All eyes turned to me. "Because it seems awfully convenient that after 12 years of your parents being too busy, too unavailable, always traveling or committed to something else, they suddenly appear tonight. The same night you were complaining about James's appearance, complaining loudly enough for us to hear through an open window." Ashley's face flushed bright red. "You were eavesdropping?" "The window was open," James said, and there was a hardness in his voice I rarely heard. "We heard everything you said about me, about how I look like something out of a horror movie, about how people lose their appetite looking at my scars." Patricia Mitchell gasped. "Ashley Marie, you did not say that." But Ashley's expression had shifted from embarrassed to defensive. "You don't know what it's been like. 12 years of explaining, of watching people stare, of having to warn friends before they meet him so they don't react badly. So instead of being grateful that your husband's father is a good man who happens to have scars from saving someone's life, you decided he was an embarrassment," I said. The anger I'd been holding back since overhearing her comments was starting to crack through. "You made him feel unwelcome in your home. You made your own husband choose between you and his father." "I never asked David to choose," Ashley protested. "Didn't you?" David's voice was cold. "Every time we planned a family event, you had a reason Dad shouldn't come. Too many people, bad timing, uncomfortable seating. I see it now. You've been pushing him away for years." "Because it's exhausting," Ashley shouted. The mask had finally come off completely. "It's exhausting being married to you, David. Your mother with her saint act. Always volunteering, always perfect. Your father with his scars and his silence, making everyone uncomfortable, and you, always defending them, always putting them first. They're my parents, David said quietly. And I'm your wife, Ashley shot back. When are you going to choose me? The silence that followed was deafening. Robert Mitchell stood up, his face a mask of disappointment. We're leaving, he said to Patricia. I won't sit here and listen to my daughter speak about the man who saved my life this way. Dad, wait, Ashley started, but Robert held up his hand. You knew, he said, and his voice was full of pain. Somehow you knew about the fire, about what happened, and you kept it from me. For how long, Ashley? How long have you known? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The guilt was written all over her face. Robert turned to James, who had stood up as well. I'd very much like to talk to you more, if that's all right. To thank you properly. To hear the whole story. But not here. Not tonight. James nodded silently. Robert pulled out a business card and pressed it into James's hand. Please, he said simply. Then he and Patricia left, walking out into the cold Christmas night, leaving behind a dinner table full of cold food and broken illusions. But that wasn't even the most surprising part of the evening. The week after Christmas was always quiet at the hospital where I worked as a volunteer coordinator. Most people were home recovering from holiday meals and family drama. I could relate to both. James had been quiet since that disastrous dinner. Not his usual comfortable quiet, but something deeper. He'd locked himself in his workshop in the garage, spending hours building a bookshelf that nobody had asked for and we didn't need. David had called twice, apologizing for Ashley's behavior, making excuses I didn't want to hear. I'd listened because he was my son, but my patience for defending the indefensible had worn thin somewhere around excuse number 5. What I didn't tell David was that I'd done something I wasn't particularly proud of. I'd called Patricia Mitchell. The conversation was awkward at first. Two women who'd met exactly once, under the worst possible circumstances, trying to navigate a situation neither of us had signed up for. But Patricia was gracious, and after the initial uncomfortable pleasantries, we'd actually started talking. I need to understand something, I'd said finally. How did Ashley know about the fire? About James? Patricia had been quiet for a long moment. I'm not entirely sure, but I have a theory. She'd explained that 3 years ago, Ashley had become obsessed with genealogy. She'd started researching family history, interviewing relatives, compiling information. Robert had mentioned the fire during one of those interviews, talking about how it had changed the trajectory of his life, how the young man who'd saved him was his ghost, the hero he could never find. Robert became very successful because of what happened that night, Patricia had told me. He'd been a mediocre student, partying too much, wasting his parents' money. The fire made him realize how precious life was. He went on to build a very successful investment firm. He spent decades doing charitable work, funding fire safety programs, helping burn victims, all because of what your husband did. And Ashley knew this? I think she figured it out somehow. Robert described the burns, their pattern, and she'd seen James's scars. She must have put it together. And instead of telling her father, she kept it secret, I said, the pieces falling into place. Because she knew her father would want to meet James, would want to thank him, and she'd spent years convincing David to keep his father at a distance. I'm so sorry, Patricia had said. If I'd known, if Robert had known, we would have come forward years ago. Now, sitting in my office at the hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about Ashley's choice. She'd known that her father had been searching for James for 55 years. She'd known how much it would mean to Robert to finally express his gratitude. And she'd kept silent because her vanity, her embarrassment over James's appearance, mattered more than her father's peace of mind. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Can we talk? Not about the dinner. Something else. Something I found. I called him immediately. What's wrong? I've been going through Ashley's things, David said, and he sounded wrecked. Not snooping exactly. She asked me to find her passport for a work trip, but I found something else. A folder labeled Robert's Hero. My blood ran cold. What was in it? Everything, Mom. Newspaper articles about the fire, hospital records, Robert's interview notes from when he was trying to find Dad. There's even a private investigator's report from 2 years ago. She paid someone to confirm that Dad was the person from the fire. 2 years. Ashley had known for 2 years and kept silent. "David," I said carefully, "what are you going to do?" He let out a long breath. "I don't know. I thought I knew my wife. I thought, despite everything, despite her faults, she loved me, that we were a team. But this? This is something else entirely. Have you confronted her?" "Not yet. She's been staying at her sister's house since Christmas. Says she needs space to think."